All right, we now have joining us on the Soccer Hour, brought to you by your NorCal Honda dealers. It is the one and only Carlos Ramirez, who, of course, you know from MLS Season Pass on Apple TV, NBC, as well as KMBR. He's everywhere. He's also got some Sharks broadcasts to his credit now, so I can't leave that out as our worlds constantly intermingle. Carlos, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
Ted, thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. It had been long overdue. And the thing that's hard is that when I'm usually closest to you at Sharks or Earthquakes, I'm usually doing things. So the
Right.
nice thing about seeing you at NBC is we actually get a little downtime when we get to chat. And I was like, I need to get Carlos's takes on the Quakes on here because I know you called a number of the
Oh, man.
games the
Yeah,
last
a
couple of
lot.
years.
A lot.
Yeah. So
A lot. Not as many as you, but a lot.
enough.
Yeah.
I can trust your take. So here's where I've been starting off with everyone lately. Being as how the Earthquakes in 2023 got into the playoffs, even if they did sneak in, they were still a decent team. Did you in any way, shape, or form see the just absolute abyss of 2024 coming? Did you in any way foresee that season happening?
Not to the extent it was in 24. I don't think anyone could see such a precipitous fall for this club. Um, you can see the holes. I think the big thing was I don't know how prepared the club was for the Kate Cowell departure. I think that left such a massive hole
Mm-hmm.
over the wings in terms of physicality and drive and both up and down the field. So I think that was poor planning on the Quakes. You don't let a talent like Kate walk out the door and not have an appropriate sub, an appropriate replacement for that kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
I think injuries, the Daniel injury early in the season hurt them. It was a revolving door of goalkeeping and trying to get William Yarbrough to settle in, which he never kind of did. There were a lot of mistakes there from pretty much everyone who stepped under the pipes. So that was not ideal. But then when you take a larger or bigger perspective or bigger look at the club, you can see the holes. You can see they needed more tracking on the midfield side of the equation, especially holding midfielder,
Mm-hmm.
people who can just chase other midfielders down and be more physical, not just occupy a space, but if someone has the ball and is going at your goalkeeper, you have to be able to track that dude down and tackle the football, recover, and then play along. And they don't have that. To this day, they don't have it. Even with the guys that came in from New England, I don't think they have that still. Maybe better, but not to the extent that this physical league demands. So that's a long-winded way of saying I didn't see the downfall this severe, but you can see the holes overall with the roster.
You brought up holding midfield specifically, and that was one of the things that I used to just kind of shake my head out. Even when they brought in Hernan Lopez, who's not a holding midfielder, but he would sometimes drop back a little bit deeper, but they so rarely held on the possession. I always joked with Joe that they were trying to be like Manchester City and then suddenly hit the long ball, spray it up the wing and not possess and just quickly attack, just one touch, boom, boom, pass, and they would turn it over and then suddenly they'd be defending again. And I think that for me was just such a frustrating thing because it's like, guys, flex the defense, make them respond to you. Stop trying to do it in one pass to create a goal. It's not going to happen. And they just kept on doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think that's a structural issue with the Quakes. I think you have to go back to how they play, what the setup is. And they mainly played out of a 4-2-3-1 last season. That was the main structure of the whole year. The problem with that to me is for that structure to work, you need your two holding midfielders to not just hold the football, but track it, because the three guys in front of you who were mainly either a combination of Hernan when he got here, Espinoza, and then either Pellegrino or Kikanovic or whoever they had playing on that left side who was an issue because that was Kate's spot. They never found that regular left wing midfielder. If those two guys can't track the football quick enough, physically enough, you're putting more strain on your three guys in front who are not physically equipped to go back and forth to recover the football. And then you're putting more problems on your four-man line, who this team didn't have. We'll see now with the additions, and we'll talk about Romney. They didn't have enough talent, I think, tackling-wise, to be aggressive and either push forward or drop back and be comfortable to win one-on-one. So that structure in and of itself to me was so problematic, because if you're going to play with a 10, which I don't know what Arena will deal with Hernan Lopez, can he play out? If he goes to a 4-3-3, can Hernan be the outside left winger because Christian will be on the right?
Right.
Can he be the left side guy behind whoever plays 9? Which is a massive question mark as of this moment. Can he be the single guy who could? I don't know, maybe. But what I do think is this team needs, and I want you to take it, this team needs to find space for Nico Shakiris to play in that, if it's a 4-3-3 with 2 legitimate holding midfielders, so he can create and go up and down and maybe be the 10, drop back and be the 8, be like a box-to-box with lesser defensive responsibility.
It's a good question, because Nico is he's an 8 that's a little bit more 10 leaning.
Yeah.
I don't know if he has the pace to be able to work inside of a double pivot. So that would be interesting to see what he can do. And I think that really opens up the question to Carlos Gruezo, who I think was, when we talk about structure, was at the source of a lot of the issues, because I don't think he's ever been what he was previously with Dallas. So we knew that was Lucci's guy that he wanted to bring in. And to Lucci's credit, the Carlos Gruezo that was in Dallas was much better. But yeah, I mean, that you're right about, how they can open that door for Nico. And the one thing about Hernan, if he went and played out on the left-hand side, I don't know if he's pacey enough for that.
No.
And I don't know if, that's what they want to do. I wouldn't be surprised if Arena set up in something like a 3-4-3 as well. That would be interesting. I think there's just so many question marks right now that unfortunately we don't have the answers to. Let me ask you this. Can Bruce Arena, who is the most decorated coach in the history of United States soccer, both at the club level and with the national team, can he turn it around?
Well, that's a big question. And we went on about this back and forth. You and I did on NBC, not on over the air, but in the hallways and on our desks. My concern with Bruce Arena is, and I want to be respectful about this, because I'm not ageist either for veteranship or being a freshman or too young. I don't know. I think football or soccer right now is a young coach's, especially MLS, a young coach's place, especially international soccer. And I think the next evolution or the next step growth-wise for MLS is to start recruiting either savvy coaches who can then impart wisdom to younger American coaches, or young and up-and-coming coaches from Mexico, South America, Spain, Argentina, which is South America, France, something like that, and then bring that knowledge and spread it around the soccer landscape in this country. I say that because I don't know. Hopefully he will be able to keep up with new ways of training, new methods, new technology, and maybe he'll surround himself with a younger crew who will be able to feed him that sort of knowledge and methodology. That's my concern, because I name me a coach, soccer or football, however you want to call it, worldwide, who is in his 70s and is, the tip of the spear, who is bringing new things to the table or the pitch. It's a late 40s, early 50s game, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the States or, Team USA just got Mauricio Pochettino. Even a guy like Mourinho, who I think still is at the top of the game, was kind of pushed out of the elite and is now coaching in Turkey. He lost, the second we're taping this, he lost a game at home against Athletic Bilbao in Europa League. That didn't happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's my concern, Ted. I wish him all the best. I root for the Quakes, even though now I call MLS games on Apple. I know, when I call a game, I call it's an objective play-by-play.
Right.
But I've covered this team for 6+ years, and I like him. I like the team. I like the city. I love the city. But I don't know, man. I was hoping we would get to see a fresher take, but maybe what this team needs is the veteran savvy coach who will, line them up and show them a more structured way of doing things. And maybe that's Arena. Hopefully it is.
Do you think that if the Earthquakes do find success under Bruce Arena, do you think that fans can, at the broader Bay Area, maybe start to appreciate guys like Christian Espinosa, a guy like, excuse me, Hernan Lopez, who I think at moments, last year, Hernan Lopez was a phenomenal player for San Jose. I think the team was flawed to the extent that we couldn't see the full realm of his abilities. Because Lopez is very talented. He's got the good genes, right? But he also is just, he's a fun, exciting football player. And then Christian Espinosa is just a blue collar, hardworking, up and down the touchline all game long, just assist after assist after assist. If they get wins, can fans glom on to those two guys?
I think so. I mean, you bring up two names that I think are for the MLS nerds or diehards, not just in San Jose, but league-wide, they know who Espinosa is. They know who Hernan Lopez is. Go back to the game. I was fortunate enough to call the Timbers Quakes game last season in Portland, and that was such a good game to have an understanding of Hernan's whole spectrum of talents and weaponry.
Yeah.
He had an over-the-top goal almost up in midfield. They recover the football. I think it was Grueso who recovers, touches it to Hernan. He sees the keeper out, and he just tips it over him almost from midfield. And you say, this guy gets it. He understands what this game's all about. So I hopefully those who are not, sitting there in the stands witnessing a 6-win, 25-loss team will be able to rally around what those two bring. What I do think is, because if they were playing for, I don't know, the Galaxy or Seattle or Inter Miami, a big name brand in the league, everyone would know who they are in a wider sense, soccer-wise, in the map, right? They would be more identifiable. But yeah, hopefully, what I do think is, and maybe Arena is able to, in his dual role as head coach and sporting director, maybe he'll be able to convince the front office, which they have with Espinosa and Lopez, but those are good names. I think, and I've said it over and I will continue to say it, this team will not be able to compete or at least draw more eyeballs if they don't go out and get a massive signing. I'm not talking about Messi or Beckham, right? We know that. But the story of the league tells you, Ted, that if you want to take the next step, you have to go out and be Orlando and bring Kaká, or DC United and bring Rooney, right? That kind of Red Bulls and land Thierry Henry. Chicago back in the day with Stoichkov or Cuauhtemoc Blanco.
And they even had Bastian Schweinsteiger recently.
Right. Yes. That's the kind of guy who I think hopefully Arena will be able to say, you know what? Yes, we have Lopez, we have Espinosa, we need so-and-so, whoever that is, right? I know Almeida tried it and wasn't successful in that recruiting process. We'll see. But I do think the team needs that splash factor that will be able to compete with other main stars in the league.
It's hard though, Carlos, and you know this because the Bay Area is so competitive. I mean, the Giants won 3 World Series in 5 years, and then a couple years later, the stadium was pretty much empty. The 49ers made it to 3 consecutive NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl, moved into Levi's, and then a couple years later, the stadium was empty because they weren't having success. The San Jose Sharks, they contended for, 15 years and then, fell off the last few. And only now that they have a burgeoning superstar in Macklin Celebrini are people starting to pay attention again. I mean, this is a very competitive market. And like you alluded to, you need those big names to break through because I always say this, whether it's Giants fans deciding to go see Steph Curry when the Giants aren't as good, whether it's 49ers fans deciding to invest in the Giants when the 49ers took a downturn. I mean, there's always another option, and that's just sports, right? That we're not talking about the incredible restaurants and museums and concert venues and just everything else that the Bay Area has to offer. There's so much competition for your entertainment dollar that you've got to be able to grab people's attention.
Yeah, and I'm just you do, and every sport has a different dynamic, and soccer is particular because unlike the NBA or the NFL, the draft, no MLS club gets to the promised land via the draft. That's
Right.
just, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't happen. You're going to get alternate pieces, filling spots here and there. You might get for instance, I remember a couple of years ago when Austin had their first overall pick, it was Danny Pereira, who was a very good winger out of Virginia Tech, and he's now converted into a holding box-to-box kind of midfielder. He's become a solid starting player for that team, right? I don't know how many people around MLS know who Danny Pereira is. And
Right.
he's become, for number one overall pick, I think he's been really productive. But that's not the rule. That's the exception, right? Again, I think MLS and specifically the Quakes have to do a better job of scouting the international market for household names to the soccer fan that are able to a degree to transcend and pull in some curious baseball, hockey, 49ers, Warriors fans to at least say, hey, heck, Bay FC did it, right? With Dana Castellanos and a couple more players who are like, hey, these are good players. We just have to at least go check them out once and see what this is about. The Quakes don't have that player. I mean, I know who Hernan Lopez was because I'm a soccer nerd.
Right.
But I don't know how many soccer fans knew, hey, got hype because the second niece or nephew of Maradona was playing. Like, you know what? That's deep. That's a deep cut. So maybe scout for that. Who's the next Rooney or Kaká or Thierry Henry or Carlos Vela who's going to come here and say, hey, we're going to go watch that guy play for the Quakes because just of brand recognition. And this team has a history I don't want to go back to, but maybe I will. George Best played here in the 80s. So I think even to the heritage and the history of the team, they owe it to themselves to go out there and land a big fish to make a splash in the San Jose pond.
Well, you even look back at the game at Levi's this past summer against Chivas, and they had 50,000 plus. It was a Leagues Cup record attended game. And obviously the South Bay has a huge amount of Chivas fans. And, Chivas, they were such a giant for so long, in the Bay Area, you've been seeing their kit forever. People have been wearing them, just for decades, even if they've fallen on harder times as of late, but their fan base showed up and showed out. I mean, I think that's the harder thing because MLS is so young, right? Like I talk to people who they've come over from England and they're, Arsenal fans and they've been an Arsenal family forever, or they're Manchester United, or if they come from, Latin America, they're going to be a fan of, the club that they grew up watching. If they're from Argentina, we can, talk about River Plate. If they're from, if they're from Mexico, there's a number of teams that have an incredible heritage, and MLS just isn't there yet. In pure timeline. I mean, it's only existed since 1996.
Yeah, it's if you compare it to the Premier League or Mexico League MX, it's in its infancy, entering its teen years. If you Premier League or English soccer or football, because the Premier League dates back to the 90s, as with the name Premier League and the restructuring of
but
English
the clubs
soccer.
are older, yeah.
Right. I mean, clubs go back to over 100 years, right? Same in Spain, Italy, Europe. You go to Brazil, Argentina, Mexico. Teams are over 100 years old. We're talking about, we're going to see a new club in San Diego this season.
Right.
But still, going back to the point, San Diego gets it. And maybe it's because it's the same, pretty much the same front office who built LAFC, and they understand when they did it with Vela and how that success came quickly to them. They went out and got Chucky Lozano. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a name I think the Quakes, that kind of name is the type of marquee name or household name that they should go out and target. I'm going to give you a name because the money's here. This is a city. This is a big market. we know what kind of money and financial surround the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. For instance, I would have loved to see the Quakes or any other team, focus on the Quakes, go out and dish out some money for a guy like Memphis Depay, who is playing in Brazil, which is a big league, right? It's the highest paying league in South America, one of the better paying leagues in the continent. But I would think or hope that, and we're seeing players now go back and forth from Brazil to MLS. A player from Orlando is going back to Palmeiras. So we see that. But I would hope that, that's the kind of move the Quakes make. A guy in his 30s who is still really capable, who would maybe transcend, as he's not Messi, he's not Beckham, we get it, but I think he's got enough panache, enough name to make curious soccer fans curious, or casual other sports fans go, hey, that guy played for Barcelona and the Netherlands national team. I'm going to go watch that guy. Maybe I'm wrong, but
No, it's a good take. I know you've got stuff to do, so I will let you go, but I'll ask you this final one just because it's curious to me. Watching the impact of Apple TV on Major League Soccer, and obviously you're doing the play-by-play, and it's an awesome gig, as I well know. Just in terms of the reach to the international markets, because I know that people. Their criticism of it was, well, you won't just stumble on it organically if you're looking for a game on a Saturday night. I get that. But now, there's a huge audience that can follow you in a global reach. And with all due respect to the regional sports markets that these teams were previously on, they did not have a global reach. I'm just curious, since you're doing the Spanish-speaking broadcast, if you've experienced that from people watching the games in Latin America specifically who have reached out to you on social, or now, are aware of these broadcasts that they weren't previously.
Absolutely. And it goes to, so Apple understands, and I think the league, we both understand that the Messi arrival was going to unlock so many subscribing fans globally, because they're going to go find Messi, right? If you're a casual fan of the sport, you love Messi, right? And you want to see him play, no matter if it's Inter Miami or San Jose or wherever he signed, you're going to go watch Messi, right? And it's two massive brands tied together, Apple and Messi, and it's easy to get it, right? I'll give you an example. I don't know how I can watch Cristiano Ronaldo games from the Saudi league here in Milpitas, where I live. I have no idea. None whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Now people know, and it's a slow process, because it takes time for people to make the marriage. Hey, MLS and Messi equals Apple, but now it's instantaneous, and then it's very much player driven, right? For instance, I'm from Venezuela, so I have a bunch of friends in Venezuela who, when Severino played for Real Salt Lake, would tune in to watch him play with Real Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Or when Joseph Martinez this year had a great year with Montreal, they would tune into Montreal games to watch him play. So it's very much player driven. There's a massive Quakes following in Argentina because of Espinoza and Hernan Lopez. So that's what's happening. Will that evolve into the Quakes having a fan club in Buenos Aires? I don't know. But I do get a lot of tweets and messages from Argentina. When Almeida was here, there was a huge, massive River Plate fan base watching games somehow, because that was pre-MLS Apple conjunction. But it's very much player-driven. Like when Schweinsteiger was here, there was a lot of fans watching in Germany.
Right. So
that's what's happening. And the fact that you can just get it with a click of a button with Apple makes it much more accessible for soccer fans worldwide.
Carlos, you're the best, man. I know you've got stuff to do, so like I said, I will let you go, but I appreciate you being so generous with your time, and I'll see you at one of 3 locations we bump into each other very soon.
Thank you, Ted. Great being with you. Thank you.